I really believe strongly now that entrepreneurialism is massively accessible to women, and there's nothing that should stop people doing it if they have an idea and they're passionate about making it successful. So it's a massive question as to how women can overcome kind of fear of not being able to do it. I think it has to be tackled from a whole variety of different ways. So for a start, role models becomes really important. And there needs to be role models of women running successful businesses at all times in their lives. So that includes people in their 20s who've started it straight from college, but that also includes mums going back to work and deciding to do something more entrepreneurial. In my experience, that's where the major confidence reduction happens, because if you've been at home looking after kids and out of the workplace, it's much harder to believe that you can do it. So the more examples that we can look up to of people who have done it, I think the better. And then going back to the points that I made earlier, that understanding that the technology is there to make it possible also becomes very key. And it might be a case of starting small and starting as kind of something that you do for a few hours a week from home, and building it up as and when you've got the capability and ability to do it. So make or break moments are interesting, because I struggled actually to think of many. I mean, I could say that when we got our initial founding team together for Bluefin, then potentially looking back, that was obviously a big moment. But at the time, it was just the next step. And what I found is that businesses, it's often very hard to focus on we've suddenly done something that's made us really successful, because it will then have just started a whole load of other challenges. And we grew, Bluefin grew up to about 300 people at the point that we sold, and at kind of multiple tens of millions of turnover. And there wasn't in that whole journey one point where we said, this is it, we've made it, because it was much more iterative than that. And actually the same has been the case with Amicable largely. It has, over the last 3 years, continually grown, but there hasn't been particularly eureka moments, although we may have had one in Jan, because we won a case in the High Court that effectively challenged the ability to be able to help a couple come to a joint arrangement. And that's huge for us, because that effectively is the High Court rubber stamping our business model and saying, yeah, this is absolutely fine, and this is kind of the way things are going in the future. I don't think anything about the C-suite culture should make it hard for people to launch their business, because it's a million miles between what happens in the C-suite and what happens when you're a startup and you're doing everything yourself. So I don't think that's actually the issue. But I think the access to contacts and finance, etc., that you get from having been senior in a big business is something that you're not going to have if you're launching a startup and you've not been involved in that world previously. So I think it's a different thing. I don't think it's a cultural issue. I think it's a networking issue. So I completely agree with the review and the barrier. That raising funding is a big barrier to a lot of businesses. From an Amicable perspective, it wasn't an issue for launch because we self-funded the first year. And since then, we have raised multiple rounds of angel investing, and it's been challenging because raising money is always challenging, but it's not been a blocker. We've managed to kind of get some very, very good angels on board that have really helped us with the business. However, the figures around VC investment, etc., are still terrifying. I mean, it is still, I think, only about 7% of venture capital investment goes to women-run businesses, and that's horrendous. And also the lack of women involved as decision makers within VC firms, which again makes it very difficult to see how the decision making isn't going to be biased in some ways. Now, we will, in order to grow Amicable further, have to go down that route and probably have to raise VC funds. So it's not been a blocker yet, but I expect it is something that we will have to do. And I'm very passionate that part of the industry really needs to change, and change as quickly as possible for more women-run businesses to be as successful as possible.